If I was a Division I pitcher stuck in the upper 80s to the low 90s and I wanted an off-season plan to make sure that when I show up in the spring, I become a draftable guy, this is the exact plan I would use and the current plan that we're using with a ton of our athletes. My assumption when making this video is that you just finished up summer ball or you're in the middle of summer ball, so your arm is healthy and ready to go. If that is not the case and you're dealing with an injury or you took a month off, this video will not help you. This plan will lead you to a huge workload that you're not prepared for. But if you're hungry and healthy, this is exactly where I'd start. So the first phase is weeks 1 through 6. We're really building the foundation for you to gain velocity. So what I want you to do in these first 4-ish weeks is building your distance of throwing until you can get to full-on long toss, letting it absolutely rip as far as you can. So how does that start? Well, week 1, we're probably not going more than 90 feet. You shouldn't, right? If you just finished summer ball, you probably pitched a decent amount. Maybe you did a little bit of a deload phase to give your body a break. I really hope that you just didn't shut down for 2 weeks to a month, because that would really put you behind. But I hope that you did kind of take a little bit back on your workload. If you did so properly, we can't just go straight to long tossing. That's going to lead to injury. So what we need to do is we need to slowly build up that throwing intensity again. So 90 feet, probably week 1, 90 feet again, maybe a couple 120s mixed in there week 2, week 3, 120, maybe 180, week 4, 180, getting close to 200. And then around week 5, we should be able to long toss as far as possible. I want you to throw the ball as far as you possibly can. Obviously, I would like it to be somewhere in the vicinity of your partner, but at the end of the day, I'm just trying to build up arm strength for you. This is what we're doing with our athletes currently who are not playing summer ball and are trying to gain velocity, or this is the plan that they're going to walk themselves into once summer ball is over. But long toss is super important. On the way in from long toss, you need to basically pull down. So what I mean by that is a lot of you guys will long toss, it's really good. And then you'll start bringing your way in and you'll hit your partner somewhere in this general range, head and up, maybe top of the chest. All that's doing is teaching you to land with your arm like this and release the ball from here instead of getting all the way out and extended. So what I'd much rather you do is below the chest or even one hop your partner. That is getting on top of the baseball and ripping down. That's actually how we train ourselves to throw properly. So that's really the biggest part of the first foundational phase of weeks like 1 through 6 is long tossing. Like, you need to build up long toss endurance. And how often should you long toss? I get that question all the time. No more than 2 times a week. That is more than enough for you to really set the foundation for you to get into the next phase of velocity, which I'll get into in a minute. But I hear guys that long toss every day. They long toss 4 times a week. That's way too much, man. It's way too much. Your CNS cannot handle high intensity every single day. It's just frying you out. A lot of you actually have everything you need to throw harder. Like, your body's in good shape, your arm's conditioned, but you never give yourself a break. So every time you go out there, you're just absolutely shot. Some of you are doing 3 showcases in a weekend, or some of you are playing in a summer league right now and you're just pitching an exuberant amount. And that's, a conversation for another time to have with your coach to make sure that you're not getting abused. But this part is really important. Long toss twice a week, weeks 1 through 6. For some of you, it might be a little bit shorter if your body's primed a little bit better. For some of you, it might be a bit longer depending on how much time you took off and how you did your deload phase. Which then brings us into phase 2, which is the pull down phase, which is really only a good 3 to 4 weeks. But pull downs can be super, super beneficial, and you're going to know pretty instantaneously. The first week of pull downs, do not expect good numbers. If you've ever done pull downs before, the first week kind of sucks. Maybe you have a bit of an increase, maybe like a mile per hour that you've before your previous PR, but don't expect, if you're a guy who pulls down like 88 to all of a sudden pull down 96. Not how it's going to work. So the first week is kind of like baseline, and then the next week is an absolute nosedive. Usually week 2, because you haven't really done a high intensity of pull downs before, usually week 2 we actually see a decrease in pull down velocity. So week 1, let's say you're like 88 mile an hour pull down, next week 84, 85, and this is where a lot of guys panic and they start to like try something else, where really your body's just getting adapted to the workload again. We built the foundation weeks 1 through 6, and now we're trying to capitalize on that, but we also haven't done these high intensity pull downs yet. So week 2 is usually like this like stalling point. Week 3 is where we start to see a bit of an increase, right? Maybe you're pulling down 90, 91, 92, and slowly start to see this uptick. We want to do pull downs for roughly 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere in that range. The first 3 weeks, 1 time a week. That's it. Again, we need to build the arm strength and the endurance to do these things. Guys just blow it out of the gate and just will pull down like 3 times a week. It's just way too much. Once we hit week 4, then we can do 2 times, week 5, 2 times. Right around week 4, week 5 is where you'll honestly understand whether pull downs are working for you or whether you need to go into something else. For some of you, pull downs just don't work. It just doesn't work for your body. It doesn't translate. So stop doing pull downs and we'll get into what you can do instead. But for some of you, velocity will start to uptick. Awesome. Ride that wave until it stops, right? So if you started out doing pull downs, let's say at 88 miles per hour, right? You had the down week. Next week, you're 89, 90, sick. Week after that, 89, 90 still. Week after that, 92, 93, okay. Week after that, 93, 95, okay. Week after that, 93, 95, time to get off the mound, right? You hit kind of like a plateau there, right? We had 2 weeks at 93, 95. You've obviously never hit that high velo before. Now, let's get on the mound. So that brings us into phase 3, which is the mound phase. And actually, this is where we see the biggest velocity gain for our athletes. And when we really study pitching velocity, this is really the kind of the portion that guys gain the most velo in. This part is where the pull downs, all the foundation you built in phases 1 and 2 really translates, because now you're getting to see actual mound velocity. So when we get into phase 3, the bullpens in the beginning are fastballs only. There's a lot of different reasons for that. The main one is we're trying to throw hard, right? If you're a guy watching this right now, you're a Division I guy most likely who's stuck in the upper 80s to low 90s. You need to throw harder. If you want to get drafted, you need to throw harder. We both know that. So I don't really care about your location and off-speed stuff right now. We're trying to help you build velocity, because if you show back up to campus at 88, 91 and you have a 3.5 ERA, it's probably not going to get you drafted. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. But if you show back up to campus and you're 95 plus, now we're talking. So those first couple bullpens are just fastballs only, 1 time a week. As you can kind of see the pattern here, right? We're starting everything once a week and then we build into more. So the first 2 weeks, 1 time a week, throw it as hard as you possibly can. It's very similar to this pull down phase that I talked about earlier. There's going to be a stalling point in those first 2 weeks where things go down. Again, you're getting used to a new stimulus. Do not beat yourself up. This is where 90% of athletes get discouraged, because you've put in 10 to 12 weeks of work and now you hop on the mound. First week is okay, and then the next week maybe it plummets and you're like, what was the point? I just did all this work for nothing. It's like, relax. It will start to uptick. You just need to keep going forward. And to speak on that a little bit more in depth, there is something called the weight loss fallacy, where a lot of people will lose weight super fast. Why? Because they've probably never been on a diet before, similar to kind of how you're trying to gain velocity. So they'll get on a huge cut, they'll lose a ton of weight, they look great, and then they hit like this plateau where they're stuck at the same weight for a couple weeks. Nothing is wrong. All that's happening right now is they're in this weight loss phase where their body's retaining more water, so the scale doesn't move, right? You need to keep doing the same thing, and eventually that water will leave, body fat will leave. But if you start to change things, and what most people do is they change their entire diet, they go back to eating like crap again because they're like, oh, what's the point? And they gain all the weight back. Don't do the same thing with your velocity training. At this point, when you hit this like 12 weeks and you start to hit a little bit of a plateau, 90% of guys will just start trying to do something differently. That's not how this works. You can't just change everything up and expect that all of a sudden you're going to start throwing harder. You need to keep sticking with the process, and velocity will come. Now, after we do the first 2 weeks of fastballs only, now we start to add in some off speed and try to see if velocity transferred to everything. There are some times where guys will gain velocity on their fastball, but you're still babying the off speed. So it doesn't translate to all your pitches, which obviously, once you face live hitters, they can pick up on that. So this is where we're trying to throw everything hard. I want you to rip your off speed the same way you're ripping your fastball. So this really brings us kind of towards the tail end of this velocity building phase, where you're back on the mound, you're starting to throw everything as hard as you can, and now we're preparing ourselves for maybe the fall or maybe the spring. But this is really kind of the framework that you can use this off season to make sure that you gain velocity, so that when you show back up to campus, you're not the same guy. You should be unrecognizable every 6 months in your baseball career. You should never show up the same guy 6 months later, because that shows a college coach, professional scout, big league GMs that you haven't really adapted. If you really look at the big leagues, all of them look pretty unrecognizable every 6 months. Paul Skeens almost adds a new pitch every 6 months. Am I saying you have to do that? Absolutely not. But All of these guys are trying to make themselves better, and every 6 months they've done something that, like, you watch MLB Network and it's like, he added this or he's moving better here. That's how you have to be as well. And that comes from, more often than not, consistency, not changing up all of this shit, right? This spring, you need to show up throwing 95 plus in order to get yourself drafted. So now that you understand fully how to build your offseason routine so you can gain velocity, well, now you need to understand how to actually make yourself a draftable guy from a mental perspective. Because now that we throw hard, that's great. But if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't understand how you can actually use this to get yourself to the next level, you're cooked. So I actually made another video on that right here where you can watch that next, and it can actually show you how to take the velocity you just had and actually use it in game and be mentally dialed, right? And if you want an actual plan built for you specifically to where you're not having to kind of use the framework that I just gave you, and you're probably going to have some questions throughout it, if you want to work with me one-on-one, you can click the link down below and you can work with me directly.